Russell was known as a lawless hellhole by the early missionaries. In the 1830s, Russell was the largest whaling port in the southern hemisphere. To the sailors descending on the port, it was a godsend. It was a land of 3-week marriages to the local women and plenty of rum with no law enforcement. Imagine 500 to 1,000 sailors descending on the town at the same time after they had been locked in their ships for a year or so at a time. An ex-convict, Johnny Johnston, managed to learn the Maori language and became well respected. He was able to purchase the first freehold land there and opened the Johnny Johnston Grog Shop in 1827. Johnny wanted to give his new place an air of elegance, so he quickly renamed it the Duke of Marlborough. The Duke of Marlborough is named after the real Duke of Marlborough, who was the richest man in the world at the time. Also managed to obtain the first liquor license for the area, so that after 13 years of serving whalers and prostitutes, Duke of Marlborough could then legally sell liquor. It was the first liquor license distributed in New Zealand, and it still hangs proudly at the bar. The license at the bar also references the succession of Queen Victoria from her father. The original name for Russell was Kororika, and that means sweet blue penguin. In fact, there is a penguin in the crest for the Duke of Marlborough Hotel. Johnny Johnston was well respected enough that he was called in to help translate the treaty with the Maori. Vokiato was formed 5 kilometers down the road. The purpose of this new town was to get rid of the lawlessness in the area and give the area a center of government. That's when Johnny had to get his liquor license in 1840. In the meantime, both the Anglicans and the Catholics were busy setting up a church and missionaries. The Anglicans set up Christ Church, and one of the interesting things is that Charles Darwin, famous for the theory of evolution, was one of the first donors to donate to the building of this church. The donations by Darwin to build a church came after he saw in Russell, quote, the very refuse of society. The church is also quite famous for its graveyard. It contains the headstone of Tamati Wakanini, who is the first chief to sign the treaty. It also has the grave of Hannah King Lethbridge, who is the first white woman born in New Zealand. There are also graves of people who fell in battle, as well as a mass grave of HMS Hazard, which suffered a great loss of life. I noticed the captain of the HMS Hazard was buried separately and had a separate stone. There were several battles in the area, and Honohiki's famous stands against the British led to some scars in the church. There's musket holes on the exterior walls. I was also surprised by the number of people that drowned, according to the gravestones. Chief Tamati Wakanini was one of the signatories on the treaty, and these statues represent the highlights of his life. Bishop Jean-Baptiste Pamplier formed the first Catholic mission in New Zealand. This French-looking building is a monument to passion. They lacked money, so they built the downstairs with adobe, mud, and the upstairs with timber. While touted as the bishop's palace, it was a fraud. Closed for instability in the 60s, but reopened in 1993 after extensive conservation. Theirs is a museum telling the story of the place's strange history. Downstairs is a Gaveau printing press, used to print Bibles in the Maori language. Captain Cook was sent to the South Pacific to measure the transit of Venus. By using that measurement, you can determine the exact scale of the solar system. So that was a pure science experiment. At the same time, he was told to use some new navigation techniques that use the sun, moon, and stars. He was to map the shoreline of everything he came in contact with in northern Australia, the South Pacific. And within 10 years, the British were able to take over the entire area as they were the only ones that had accurate maps. The museum in Russell has a scaled replica of Captain Cook's ship, the Endeavour, which is interesting to see how the old ships are put together. I was quite surprised how deep the bottom of the boat is. On my boat, if you discount the keel, the parts of the boat that are actually in the water are only about 2 feet deep, and this allows it to go fairly fast. But as far as the Endeavour goes, this scaled down model was 3 feet below the water line, which probably means about 20 feet deep. An entirely different theory of sailing. The museum also contains muskets, swords, revolvers, all sorts of interesting things from British military and Captain Cook's ship. The museum also contains many artifacts from the local Maori. The gourds fashioned into bowls, paddles that could also be used as weapons, carved jade that was jewelry and quite valuable. This lobster was the biggest lobster I've ever seen. I stuck my hand near it just so you can get an idea of the size. And there were stone axes and tools, handmade hooks for fishing, and weights for fishing also. And these were some stuffed kiwi birds. I understand there's still lots of kiwi birds around. Haven't seen them yet. And there was this canoe. It was about 20 feet long. It was pretty impressive that they got that. Has to be one of those out of one log. These are from the extinct moa bird, leg bone, harpoons from the whaling days when that was the primary source of everything in Russell, and some whale bones there. Later on, people took up pearl diving until they realized that they could just grow pearls, and that's the way they do it now. They farm them. Tikis, and these were household goods from the time. Everything to me seemed really miniature, except the watches and the books were regular size, but pipes, glasses, everything else was tiny. And this was a cannon that was left here from one of the early ships. It had been moved around several times, but it is original, but the carriage was reproduced later on. Please click on like and subscribe. It's free and it really does help me get attention. And with that, we will move to the Sailor's Delight, the Sundowner. Enjoy yourself.